Hi, friends, and welcome once again to Learning to Lead podcast with Dr. Bobby Hill. That's me, and most importantly is my guest. So my guest today is Michael Morisi, and you're going to learn a lot about his life, his experiences. He is a spiritual leader, a pastor to many, a businessman, an entrepreneur, and has his hands involved in a lot of different things, even today, which I'll let him tell you a little bit more about what he does with Family Foundation. And then we're going to dive into his background and find out that he has actually spent time in prison for something he was not guilty for. That's supposed to be a tease, and hopefully you'll stay tuned for the rest of the program. Please like and subscribe to Learning to Lead so we can see you from time to time. And this is Mike Marissi. Mike, so good to have you on Learning to Lead today.
Well, Pastor Bobby, thank you so
It's
much.
a
It's
joy.
an honor to be here.
All right. So let's first of all, before we promo your book and talk through some of the experiences you share in your book, tell us a little bit about what you're doing currently and how you got involved in Family Foundation.
Well, the Family Foundation is a family policy council. They're located in about 40 states. They were originally started by Focus on the Family years ago. And we are policy focused, trying to help get biblical values back to policymaking in the state. So we have a policy team. We have a law team. It's called Founding Freedoms Law Center. They defend people who've had their religious liberties violated at no cost to them. And I lead the Church Ambassador Network, which is an opportunity to get the shepherds of God's church together with the shepherds of government to hopefully get them on the same page that God is on. So it's a great honor. I travel all over the state. I get an opportunity to meet with pastors and elected leaders on a regular basis. I spend a great deal of time with state leadership, with the governor and with the lieutenant governor. We are so fortunate in Virginia to have senior leadership that loves the Lord first, puts God ahead of everything, lets God lead and guide their decision making. So between Governor Youngkin and Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears and even our Attorney General Jason Miyares, they're all people of very strong, deep faith and strong values and conviction.
A lot of people may not know that.
No,
You know,
they do now.
They do now. And it is a great comfort.
Yes,
I know
it is.
for me and many of my friends, it is a great comfort. They're godly people. So Family Foundation focuses you more on a state-by-state kind of level, or is it federal focus?
So
or both?
every state has their own.
Every state has
family
their
policy
own.
council. We are just focused on Virginia.
Right.
And the Commonwealth is in a very, we're in a very sensitive and unique time right now. There's a lot going on with Democrat-controlled House and Senate. There are some bills and some constitutional amendments before us that are things that we would have never imagined. Unrestricted abortion up until the day of delivery, parental rights, and stripped from being able to. There's no parental authority necessary for a young girl to have an abortion. I mean, we've gotten to a place now where we really have to, as Christians, take on the responsibility that I think God gave us to be vocal and involved and engaged in who's going to be leading our state.
Yeah. It's always a challenge, particularly for those of us holding to biblical values. You made a statement a while ago about I like that. So trying to help spiritual shepherds with governmental shepherds. So I'm curious, which are more challenging to lead?
Honestly,
a
little both. There are a lot of pastors who unfortunately have gotten to a place in their careers where they are more concerned about making people feel comfortable on Sunday than teaching them and shepherding them, which generally results in some conviction.
Sure.
Government leaders, I tell a lot of them, you have to be willing to give up this seat. You have to recognize, as we read in Romans 13, there's no leadership that God didn't put into place.
Right.
So if you're in this seat, vote, support and honor God with the decisions that you're making. And if you lose it as a result, that means that God has something else for you. But they don't. There are a lot of, especially on the Democrat side, there are a lot who proclaim their faith and their love for Christ, but then will still vote for things that are contrary to God's word and His desires, and they do it because they're afraid they're going to lose the seat if they don't go along, play along.
In some ways, the kind of the Achilles heel for a government leader is the same Achilles heel that's being used by spiritual leaders, and They just lose their seat in a different way.
That's right.
So you would say that's the biggest challenge in affecting pastors, is particularly pastors who are more interested in their position, pleasing people, than necessarily doing what they do by conviction. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I think the biggest threat to the American church is a weak pulpit. God established the church to be so that people could be shepherded to draw closer to Him, to live their lives more in alignment with Him. And I don't think that's happening in a lot of churches. I was fortunate enough to come up in your church, and so I was always...
I was getting ready to say, what did I do wrong?
You never did. You always taught the Word of God in a way that would cause conviction. It caused me to walk out of there on Sunday and think, wow, I have to do better. I want to do better. I want to draw closer to the Lord. I want to learn more about Him. I'm going to read the Bible more. I don't think that happens in a lot of churches, and I've visited a lot of churches where I walk out and I'm thinking, that wasn't really relevant for me today. And there are pastors who have also bought into the lie that the issues of gender and marriage and abortion and parental rights are political. And they believe those are political, so they should stay out of the pulpit. And those are not political issues.
So they just avoid them.
They avoid them. These are biblical issues that people need to be told about. And if they're not being told about it by their pastor, then they're going to be told about it by CNN.
Well, they're going to buy some media outlet's view.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we have become so desensitized as Christians to what's happening around us, and the reason it's happening is because we're quiet.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I've been in full-time ministry and pastored for 42 years, and leading people spiritually today is the most challenging season I know that it's ever been since I've been alive. And gosh, I'm not sure if I had to play prophet and make a prediction for the future. I don't know. I don't know what I would predict, but I think I can say with confidence it's tenuous.
Yeah.
It's tenuous, and
hard.
it depends greatly on how bright our lights are going to shine and how salty Christians are deciding to be.
Yep.
And
Well, I think that's an issue too. I think we recognize that we're supposed to be the salt, but sometimes things can get a little too salty. So it's all about, we have to remember that we have to deliver the message from the heart of Jesus, not beating people over the head and condemning them because of the way they believe. The thing that's been the toughest for me, honestly, over the last several years is to constantly remind myself when people will say things and they'll actually use the Bible to validate.
Sure.
Used to be a lot of anger and dislike would rise up in me. Now it just breaks my heart because I know how lost they are and how deceived they've been. And now my desire is to help them to learn the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a tough job, tough role, brother. I'm praying for you.
It's a blessing. I'm honored to do it.
Well, let's do this. We want to put this in reverse a little bit because I want people to understand some things you've been through, right? Mm-hmm. So let me, first of all, give a quick promo on your book.
Thank you.
I can be bolder than you about those things. I can do the advertisement, and then you can tell about it. But basically what we're going to talk about today is what's in the book. Mm-hmm. So we won't be able to go as in-depth as what some people would want and should. And here it is. So It Was Never About Justice. I love the subtitle, right? It was never about justice, exposing corruption, revealing grace. That the subtitle makes someone open it up.
Yeah.
All right. So the title catches the attention, and then the subtitle says, "Oh, I want to read this." Right. So, Michael, this book was out 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, right? And what I like about it is not only is it a fascinating story, one that kind of strips back the covers on some things that is very revealing. Revealing corruption, that's pretty straightforward, right? But most importantly is the grace that is spoken of is Jesus is presented very clearly here, and Mike makes a strong case for why Christ can how he can make a difference in your life and why we should consider him. So I love on the back of the book it says, only to find Jesus in the furnace with him. So, a book about living in the furnace and what you learned from it. What motivated you to write this book?
Well, God was really prompting me a lot. I'm not a writer. He prompted me a lot to write about what happened. Because I think, and in this particular time in our culture when we see so much going on in our justice system and so many allegations of corruption and innocent people going to prison and excuse me. So I think that he wanted that to be revealed. But what really prompted me to write this was the brokenness that I see in so many people who don't recognize that when we go through a trial, we have two choices. We can either focus on that trial, which is what the enemy wants us to do, and it'll destroy us. It'll wreck us. It'll drive us to some kind of either drug or alcohol or some kind of a vice that will help us to find comfort in the midst of a trial. Or we can surrender it to the Lord, sit at his feet and watch what he does. And what he did for this 60-year-old guy who walked into federal prison for the first time, which is a terrifying thing to do, was he let me know beyond a doubt that his promises of never leaving or forsaking us are real and are true because he was with me every step of the way. And there are so many stories in there, far too many to go into on this show, about how he showed up. And the one thing that I can say is I spent 8 months in federal prison for something I didn't do, and I wouldn't pass it up for anything. And that's a hard thing to say because it was miserable in there, and it was miserable being away from my family. But what I watched, what happened between he and I, and the intimacy that we were able to develop, that was deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. But what he did through me and the number of men who turned their lives over to Jesus in that time that I was there, it is just so beautiful.
So it really
so beautiful.
It wasn't just what Jesus was working out in you. It was also what he was doing through you.
Right.
And both of those were
Right.
important. So 8 months behind bars for something you didn't do. So let's at least give our viewers some context. You had been a businessman, entrepreneur, been involved in a number of different enterprises and opportunities. Without giving away the whole book, give us a little backdrop. And then I happen to remember the shocking moment that you had to visit a knock on your door. So tell the folks how it happened, and then we'll talk about really not so much. I think the part that we can leave out is the ongoing legal conflicts that started going on behind the scenes that then finally led to you being put behind bars. So we'll let people enjoy that part of the read. But you would have never imagined, it was a shock to you, a surprise to you, that all of a sudden you were faced with some felonies, correct?
Yes. Yes. So we had launched a company that used some state funds as a part of our startup budget. And so when the company failed and the state was left with about $4 million outstanding, the Commonwealth of Virginia conducted an investigation, a very detailed investigation. They took all of our records. We gave them access to everything. After several months, they came to us as the former leadership of the company, and said, "You guys did everything right. We accounted for every penny. You are no longer a target of the investigation. We're done with this. We're satisfied." That was in 2017. In 2019, literally a matter of a few days after I got back from being in China with you.
Yeah.
So you'll recall that I was so on fire for Jesus, I literally wanted to go back to China for a year.
Yes. We were trying to figure out how to convince your wife.
I know we were. That's right. And my kids.
Yeah.
And I got a target letter saying that I was being investigated for what they called a scheme to commit fraud. So when I called them, I said, did we commit fraud? And they were like, no. I said, did we conspire? Was there a conspiracy? And he's like, no. There was a scheme to commit fraud because at one point in a bankruptcy, unsecured creditors can't get any money. At one point, I had written 5 emails. I wasn't even employed in the company anymore, but the chief counsel asked me, because I had the relationships, to 5 unsecured creditors letting them know we did not have any money to pay them. Well, when I said we do not have any money to pay you, they happened to have money in the bank. And so he believed, this prosecutor kind of stretched this to believe that because I said we have no money, and there was money sitting in a bank account that I didn't sign on for a company that I didn't work for, that was a scheme to commit fraud, even though by law we couldn't give them any money. I mean, it's so ridiculous, you can't even. So he charged me with 5 counts of a scheme to commit fraud, 5 counts of money laundering and 5 counts of obtaining funds or use of funds obtained through false pretenses. So it's ridiculous, 15 felonies. And then I sat down with an IRS investigator, and he said, I added up all your deposits into your bank account last year, and they exceeded your income. So I believe you underreported your income. I'm like, well, what you believe? I'm like, you have to have some evidence for this. He goes, oh, yeah, we will. He ended up then recalculating what I was supposed to, sending it off to the IRS, and I got a bill from them. No, I never had an opportunity to defend myself at all. So I got indicted for these charges, and I went to a local attorney, and he said, this is, the biggest stretch of this code. In fact, he reminded me that in 2015, during Governor McDonnell's Supreme Court case, one of the Supreme Court justices said that this statute was unconstitutional and should be stricken because you can literally charge someone with a federal crime where no crime was ever committed. That's what he did to me. And it was a challenge, but they sat me down the next day and told me that he had agreed that he would dismiss everything if I would plead guilty to one charge. Well, that told me that he didn't have a case and that he knew he didn't have a case.
Right.
But my public defender said, look, she said, this particular prosecutor will see to it that you spend 10 years in prison for something you didn't do. Play the game, and we'll make sure you go home to your family. You won't do any time. Well, she didn't have the authority to tell me that.
Yeah.
But she told me that anyway. And I started doing research into him, and I started asking attorneys around town. And there were other attorneys that I tried to hire, and they all said to me, I would take your case if it wasn't this prosecutor. One particular attorney, one of the guys who's very well known in this area for defending federal cases, said, this prosecutor will lie and manipulate the law and you will lose, and you will spend 10 years in prison. Take the plea.
Wow.
And you get to a point where you're like, no, God, I know you're not going to let this happen. I'm just going to trust you and I'm going to go to trial. But they intimidate you so much. They threaten and intimidate, and they kept telling me this 10 years, 10 years. 10 years, you're going to be in prison for 10 years. And I ended up finding, I won't go into all the details, but I ended up finding evidence that he had hid exculpatory evidence and had submitted something to the grand jury that was false. And my attorney said, you just don't understand. This case was never about justice. You were targeted, and if you fight him, you will spend 10 years in prison for something you didn't do. And then she told me to write a book that I'd make millions. I haven't made millions yet.
I was just going to say, I just want
not quite
I
there.
want to be clear. We haven't made millions yet.
We're not there yet, but
so what without, too many indicting statements, I guess, we don't want you back in court again. But what do you think was the true motivation?
She told me that
use the word targeting, sorry.
Yes. My public defender told me that he wanted to be appointed as a judge, as a magistrate judge, and that this was a high-profile case.
Okay.
And so that's why he wasn't willing.
A notch in his belt.
A notch in his belt. And he did get promoted after this case, not to judge, but he did get promoted to the head of some division over there. But let's talk about the good part. So I did go to federal prison.
Yes, you did.
The crazy thing is that in February I was sentenced with a delayed entry. They were giving me 30 days to get my affairs together, but then COVID came. So it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. But I wrote a letter to the judge, and I told her that the prosecutor lied to her in sentencing. So when the attorney general came out and said that no one with 2 years or less and nonviolent is supposed to be sent to a federal prison because they were battling the COVID.
Right, I recall.
It was awful. Everybody was getting home confinement. There were over 100 inmates from Petersburg, right up the road here, who were released. So I went to my public defender. I said, listen, you need to file for me to get home confinement. I thought, this is perfect. I'm not going to prison. She refused to file that paperwork with the judge because she said the prosecutor asked her not to. So who is she working for?
Yeah, exactly.
But
She's
he was mad. She wrote in an email. He was mad at me because I wrote that letter to the judge, and so he went. And not only that, but what he choreographed after I went to prison was unbelievable. I finally got to prison in August or July 29th. I was placed in solitary confinement. I was not given any access to talk to my family, which is contrary to, usually you can talk to your family the same day you check in, for 23 days. And then I end up spending a total of 62 days locked in solitary. So in solitary, I have no access to anything. I can't talk to anybody on the phone. I don't have, I can't have newspapers. I can't have, there's no TV, there's no radio, there's no nothing. And that's what they left me. And when I got there, when I self-surrendered, the captain met me and he said, I don't know who you made angry, but I released 78 guys this week. You won't be here 2 days. So the counselor came in and met with me on my first day, and she said, we'll have you out of here in a couple of days. This is ridiculous. I don't even know why they sent you here. And then it went on. Weeks went on, weeks went on. And then she finally came and said to me, she said, your prosecutor told the warden not to let you out. So, I mean, even while I was there, he was still working behind the scenes. And the things that he wrote about me in his objection to everything I tried to accomplish were...
So how many days in solitary?
62.
So at what point were you able to shift from an angry a mindset of I have been taken advantage of. This isn't right. In other words, holding on to what should be just for you and fair, and shifting to a perspective of looking at it from the standpoint of what is God doing here? How long did that take?
It took a little while. So I got a Bible the second day that I was locked up. But my argument with God was, I have served you. You know what we all say. I committed my life to you in 1995. I have served you. I'm in ministry full time now for 5 years. I have studied and read the Bible. And it's kind of crazy, but he actually said to me in that moment, hang on and let me just show you everything I've forgiven you for over all these years that you think you've been doing such a great job. And that is a really heart-wrenching time to go through with the Lord, because he reminds you of everything. But I opened the Bible and I read the Bible in 9 days from the beginning to the end.
It's amazing what we can do when we don't have anything else to do.
Nothing else. I'm 10 hours a day. When the lights came on, I started reading the Bible. When the lights went off, I'd put it down. And then I wrote a complaint because I was being held in solitary. I wrote a complaint at the request of one of the lieutenants. He said, this is wrong. You shouldn't be here. Write a letter of complaint to the chief counsel of the region. He gave me his contact information. Send it to your wife. He said, if you address it to him, they'll throw it away because they pick up your mail.
Right.
Send it to your wife and have her type it up and send it to the council. The next day they came in and said, we have to swab you for COVID. I said, I've been locked in this cell for 60 days. He goes, where do you think I could have picked up COVID? She goes, well, you're leaving. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to get to go home. And she's like, oh, no, you're going to New Jersey. And I'm like, New Jersey? The lieutenant came back around and he said, they opened your mail last night and they read your letter that you wrote to your wife. And they called the regional director and he said, get him out of my region before the attorney gets that letter.
So they opened the mail that you had.
Outgoing mail. So they shipped me up, and when I got off the bus in New Jersey, the captain met me again, and he said, if you write a letter like that here, I promise you I'll ship you all over this country, and you won't talk to your family for a year. I said, message received.
Wow.
But God.
Yeah.
I walked into that place, and I'm an old dude in that place, and I'm a white guy, and I'm 60 years old, and
so draw us a picture of the difference between the two prisons.
Well, in this one, it's a dorm environment, so now you're mixed in with everybody. So the room that I was in had 2 guys that had been convicted of murder, 2 guys that had been convicted of armed robbery, bank robbery, and 1 guy who had been convicted of moving tons and tons of cocaine. So these guys are all, the guy with the least amount of time in there was 16 years. And I'm walking in with a 12-month sentence left. So, and the crazy thing is, when you walk in, you have to have your court papers because they want to review it and make sure that you're not a sex offender because they are outed there. And they make sure that you didn't enter into a plea agreement by narking on someone else.
Okay.
If that happens, they make you go back to the solitary confinement. They're not going to allow you in their room. But I come in, they ask me what my name, I have my Bible in my hand, they ask me what my name is, and I tell them Mike, and they're like, no, you can't do that. We have to come up with a name.
We have to come up with a name.
He's got a Bible, call him pastor. That was it. It stuck. And the Lord told me, start a Bible study. And I was like, I don't even know what to do. So I put signs up saying, tonight at 7 o'clock, I'll be doing a Bible study if anyone wants to come. And guys tore the signs down, and they were like, look, you need to learn. You don't get to make those kinds of decisions here. There's a hierarchy in this building. And there was one guy in particular they told me to stay away from because he would rip the pages out of the Bible. And So I did the Bible study. I went into the room and I sat down. First 3 nights I was by myself. And then the next couple of nights, these 3 guys came in and they were just yearning for the Lord. And we had a fabulous time of study and talking and fellowship. And it was great in prayer. And the next day, this guy comes to my room and he says, come on, this guy wants to see you. The guy that they told me to stay away from.
The bad dude.
The guy that runs the whole place.
Yeah.
And so I went down there and they put me in a room by myself with him. And he sits down there's like a bed there, and he sits down on the side of the bed beside me, and he goes, I want you to tell me about this Bible study you're doing. And I said, well, what do you know about the Bible? He said, nothing. I've never read the Bible, not a word of it. And I said, well, why don't you just come to the Bible study? And he said, I can't because there's sex offenders in there. I said, well, I didn't ask them what their crime was. I just know that they're yearning for the Lord. Bobby, I spent 2.5 hours with this guy. He was literally on the floor, just crying his eyes out, begging God. He was crying so hard that the 2 guards that he had at the door came in thinking that I had done something to him.
Oh, my.
Begging God to forgive him for all the awful sins he had committed in his life.
It was genuine.
He was very genuine. He was broken, and he revealed a lot of stuff to me that he probably shouldn't have, but I kept it to myself.
Yeah.
But this is what happened. When he stood up and I gave him a hug, which I guess you're not supposed to do in prison, but I did it
Probably
anyway.
not. Yeah.
And when I did, he looked at me and said, you're the first man that's ever hugged me in my life.
Amazing.
And he was probably almost 40 years old. And at that moment, I said, okay, God, I know why I'm here now. And he showed up that night at the Bible study with fear on the faces of the guys when he walked in the room, shook hands with all of them, apologized to them for the way he had treated them and the way they had been treated in that building, called them his friends, and promised them that they would never be mistreated again. So he sat down with us that night, and the next night 17 men came in because they found out he had.
It was okay. Yeah.
There were whites, Hispanics, blacks, sex offenders in there, everybody. The guards came by and were flabbergasted.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going on. And interestingly, after it got up to about 20, 25, and I'm doing it 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, the guards came by and they were like, you're not allowed to do this. Inmates can't gather Christians more than 4 in a group. And I said, hold up. I said, the Muslims get up and they pray 5 times a day, 20 of them in there, and we're told that if we interfere with them, we get punished. But I can't gather Christians? And he said, no, only in the chapel. And I said, but the chapel's closed because we were locked in the building because of COVID. And he's just like, you keep doing this, you're going to lose your good time and you're going to go to the SHU, they call it, the special housing unit, which is solitary. But I just kept doing it. And finally, they called me over the speaker one day to come down to the counselor's office, which is not usually a good thing. Yeah. And I walked in, and the captain that was in charge of basically the prison's version of the SWAT team, he said, brother, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. No one will bother you anymore. He said, because this is the first time we've ever gone a month in this building with no fights, no stabbings, no problems, no guards hitting their emergency buttons, no problems. He said, so you're doing something right.
So they had seen
They saw a tremendous
cultural
change.
shift
Yep.
inside the prison.
Yep. In the whole 6 months that I was in that building, there was 2 fights. And guys were fighting because that's another whole story, but
yeah.
they get drunk, so they fight, they make their own liquor in there, so that's another whole story.
Yeah.
But
we don't have
but
time
it was
for that.
it was just a beautiful thing. And then I was supposed to get out in September. They had reduced my sentence from 24 months to 16, and I was supposed to get out in September. And April the 2nd, they called me and said, you're going home next week. And I said, why? She said, I don't know, but don't ask any questions. We're getting you out of here. And on April the 8th, I came home. And the crazy thing is, 2 days later, I found out I had throat cancer. And I had surgery within a week of coming home. And the doctor said if I had waited another month, I'd probably have less than a year to live. So now we know why I got out early, because God said, I've got too much for you to do.
So, those experiences, when you're facing that, maybe the uncertainty was as big of a challenge as anything, right? The sense of I should be able to get out of here, but I can't. Mm-hmm. But I don't really know when I'm going to be let out. That had to be a difficult thing. So what I want to do is just highlight some of the most profound lessons that you gleaned during that time? Things that any of us can apply to our lives.
Well, I referenced it a little bit in the very beginning. In the first few months when I'm locked in solitary confinement and I'm reading the Bible, but I'm just kind of losing my mind in there. I haven't talked to my family. I was very, very focused on doing what I needed to do to reveal the fact that I wasn't supposed to be there and get out. So I'm writing letters. I'm writing letters to the judge. I'm writing letters to TV people. I'm doing everything that I know how to do. And at some point, I stopped and I just said, I felt like God was just saying, would you please, for the first time in your life, let me lead? Because I'm one of those guys who, admittedly, God will set me on a path and I'll get the first few steps in and then I'm like, I got this. And I just keep going. And he's just like, that's not the path that I had for you. So I don't know. I just got to a point where I said, I'm going to surrender this to you. I'm going to put this at your feet. I'm going to sit at your feet. I'm going to take my wisdom and guidance from you, and I'm going to let you handle this. And the peace that came over me was amazing. Like the guys that were in my room would say, like, I've been here 16 years, and you have more access than anyone has ever had to whites, blacks, and Hispanics. I mean, it's very segregated in prison. They all eat only in their own groups. They had their own TV rooms. So the black TV room they welcomed me in, and I would go sit in there and watch TV with them. And the guards would be like, "What in the world? We don't understand what's going on here," because they've never allowed a white guy to come in before. And it was because I wasn't a threat to anybody. I literally just tried to walk in the
Because you
Spirit
didn't
of
go
God.
in as a white guy. You went in as a lover of Jesus.
As a son of God.
Right,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. And so the message and the lesson that I learned was, no matter what we're going through, like I tell God now, no matter what you throw at me, I'm still going to trust you. I'm still going to worship you. I'm still going to praise you. I'm still going to pray to you. I'm not going to allow the struggles that I go through here to change the fact that you deserve my worship and my praise at all times.
Mike, that's a powerful lesson that all of us can apply in our daily life. If you had to step back, and I remember communicating with you before you went in and while you were there, and I think one of the challenges that I was offering was, Mike, make sure that you're trying to view all the challenges and the adversity from God's
Wow, so good.
eyes.
Yeah, that was so
what
good.
what does God think about what's going on? Not like, man, I'm suffering and I'm struggling here, but you did suffer. I mean, that is suffering. I know Christians who don't think Christians have suffering, but you have a different story. So how can you encourage and advise people who are going through terrible circumstances? Yeah, maybe they're not behind bars, or maybe they are behind bars, but you can encourage them to adopt a certain mindset and a certain heart condition to be able to go through the most challenging times.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There, so many people, and you probably as well, would tell me afterwards that they noticed a point where all of a sudden my letters changed drastically, and it was in that moment
Change
where
of tone.
Yeah, and you just said it. I said to God one morning, I said, okay, I want to wake up tomorrow and I want to see everything I see through your eyes. I want to hear with your ears and I want to feel with your heart. And Bobby, the next day I looked at men that I hadn't spoken to and I saw them totally different. Instead of seeing them as mean, angry guys, I saw them as broken boys. Like some of these men just had horrific childhoods, grew up on the streets.
Abused, traumatized.
Some crazy stories that were where we just did not take good care of children who turned into not good men. But when I looked at them, I saw them through God's eyes, and I would see the hurt and the brokenness, and I'd go over and sit down and talk with them. And what a difference it made for me, because now my perspective was from him, as opposed to looking at it through human eyes and thinking, wow, because some of these guys committed some crimes that were so bad that, our human side, we would never want to speak to them. We would think, no, you deserve to go to hell for the rest of your life. But that's not what God wants for you. And so I started looking at things that way. And I started, like, guys would tell me, they're like, you're way too happy to be sitting in prison. Because I'd wake up every morning. But you know what I did? I woke up every single morning and picked up my Bible before I did anything. Of course, you didn't have any cell phones in there. So
Right.
there was hundreds of them in there, but they're not allowed.
Yeah, but
so
not allowed.
I'd read the Bible in the morning. I'd read every day in the afternoon. I'd read at night. And then I read books that, you sent me books. Other people sent me books. And so my entire focus was on I want to see things through your eyes, and I just ended up with a peace. And I told Shannon, my wife, I'm just like, I'm going to be here as long as God wants me to be here, and I'm going to do what He wants me to do. And I walked those halls feeling completely safe, and I shouldn't have. Realistically, I shouldn't have. I mean, there's some unwritten rules, I guess, in prison that if a guy's over 60, you have to give him a lot of grace before you punch him in the face. But I just was so easygoing. I mean, I just carried His Spirit with me, and people would be like, guys would come to me that had never spoken to me before and say, will you pray for me? And so it just became such an experience. We all trust God, we believe in God, we know God, but we all want that burning bush moment, that moment where beyond a doubt that God is here, He's involved in this, He is walking with me, He is protecting me. I'd lay on the nights that everybody would be drinking and it would be kind of loud and crazy in there, I'd lay in my bunk and it's like I would see warrior angels standing by my bed. And
Sure,
I feel like God just said, go to sleep, man, you're good. No one's going to bother you. And they never did. I never, ever felt threatened or had a problem there. The only time that I ever got confronted was there was a guy there. He was 74 years old. He was the boxing coach, so he was in incredibly good shape for a 74-year-old and remarkably fast hands. I watched him train sometimes. He was the head of the Muslim group, and he did not like the fact that my groups were growing so big. And one of the Muslim guys came to me one time, and he said, I want you to teach me about Jesus, but I don't want anyone to know. And so we started talking privately about Jesus. And then he came to me and he said, He's going to confront you. And he said, I want you to know that we're not going to let Him touch you. And he did. It was one of those times where they surrounded me and he got in my face and he was holding his fist up at me. And I just looked at him and said, you're not going to hit me. And I said, I've done nothing to offend you. He said, your very existence offends me. And I said, well, Jesus loves you, man. Oh, you got it. And he's like, don't talk to me about Him. I said, all right. And I literally just walked away. And the people that witnessed this could not believe that they just let me walk away.
Wow.
Because
that didn't happen.
When the Muslims surround you, you're going to get a beat down. Yeah. I mean, I'm just sorry. That's the way they operate.
So what I want to do is you've described a way to approach life and challenges. Is that possible for someone who's not sitting behind the bars in the midst of that? And you were under, obviously, a special grace. Are people able to live that way today on a day-to-day normal life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you and I both know that. But it all comes down to surrender. And this is where I think there is like this cultural Christianity that I'm seeing, that's been developed here, where Christians believe that they're saved, that their salvation is secure, and they've forgotten that the Bible says those who endure to the end.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've got to take on everything. And if you could just get to a place in your walk with Christ where you say, He said, do it in my strength. He said, turn it over to me. Let me lead you. Let me guide you. This is the thing that I think most people are missing, is the peace that you and I are able to walk in every day, no matter what we face. Mm-hmm. We're going to face hardship. We're going to face disappointments. We're going to have times where we're going to go, God, I really have no idea what you're doing, but I don't have to know because I trust you. Yeah. So give me discernment to just stick with you. Yeah. And you can do that. You don't have to go to prison to surrender your life to the Lord. No. This is what He's calling us to do. And He promises us that He will never leave us or forsake us, and He doesn't. The Bible says no weapon formed against us will prosper. A lot of people misunderstand that, because what that tells me is weapons are going to be formed against us. Absolutely. Things are going to happen, but they don't prosper. The only way they prosper is if we allow them to take us down. Right. If we focus on Him, then we win. In the midst of the battle, we win. And what I learn through the challenges that I go through is so valuable for me, and how I what kind of husband I am, what kind of father I am, what kind of businessman I am, what kind of pastor I am, what kind of friend I am. Mm-hmm. Those are all lessons that we learn through hardship.
Yeah.
And seeing the beauty, grace, and glory of God in the midst of those hardships.
Well, the truth is that all of us have an opportunity to live for Jesus and to walk in a overcoming mindset. But the key, as you heard Mike's story, is that intimate relationship with Jesus. Mm-hmm. If that's not there and it's maintained through prayer and the Word of God and drawing close to Him, if we don't have that, folks, what's going on around us in the world today, it's going to be miserable. But we have the opportunity to live an abundant life through the power of Jesus Christ. And you've heard some of the keys to that here through Mike's story today. I want to encourage you to check out this book. It's really a blessing. You'll get some of the details and some of the horror stories that he didn't tell today on our program, but it will bless you. Hopefully, it will also lead you closer to Jesus. It was never about justice, exposing corruption, revealing grace by Michael Morisi. And I'm blessed today to wrap up this program, encouraging you to like and subscribe. And we're praying for you and look forward to joining you on the next episode of Learning to Lead. God bless you.
Thanks for tuning in to Learning to Lead. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow Dr. Bobby Hill on social media for more inspiration, insights, and updates. For more information on his ministry roles and resources, visit drbobbyhill.com.